Bioshock is a video game masterpiece. Really, it doesn't get much better than this. The game has it all: superb gameplay, story, atmosphere, and one hell of a twist ending.
Would you kindly find a crowbar or something?
Set in Rapture, a twisted underwater utopia gone wrong, Bioshock presents a setting ripe with creative potential for a film adaptation. So it's no surprise that a Bioshock movie was announced shortly after the game's release. Today, we're going to find out how it started, what happened to it, and try to piece together what it might have been. This is Canceled Video Game Movies, Bioshock.
And the winner is...
Bioshock.
Irrational Games released Bioshock in 2007 to universal acclaim. While Bioshock was captivating the gaming world, its publisher, 2K Games, couldn't help but wonder if the city of Rapture could have the same effect on a different medium. Film. 2K began shopping around Bioshock's film rights immediately after the game released, but they didn't sign any contracts, at least not right away. In a savvy move, 2K waited until the end of 2007, when Bioshock swept up its many Game of the Year awards. Then, using all of the game's many accolades as ammo for negotiations, 2K went back to the very first studio that they had met with, Universal Studios. In a multi-million-dollar deal, 2K signed away the film rights to Bioshock. No exact dollar amount is known, but it was rumored to be one of the most expensive licensing deals in history, at least at that time. Universal knew that licensing video game properties wasn't always a sure thing. In fact, they were no stranger to the whole ordeal. They had already been burned once by Microsoft in 2005, when production on the Halo film came to a standstill. Let's save that one for another time. With lessons learned from Halo, Universal wasn't going to be burned twice, so they structured the Bioshock contract in such a way that would all but ensure that the film would actually be made. So what happened? Universal began to assemble an all-star production crew for Bioshock. Having just completed Pirates of the Caribbean, Gore Verbinski was signed on to direct, with screenwriting duties being handled by John Logan, who has a bunch of heavy-hitting blockbusters under his belt, including the likes of Gladiator, 007 Skyfall, and The Last Samurai. With many of the key players in place, the film was shaping up to be something special. Gore Verbinski was having regular meetings with Irrational Games creative director Ken Levine, and they seemed to share a similar creative vision. Pre-production on Verbinski's R-rated Bioshock was set to begin as soon as its script was finished. From the technical side of things, Zack Snyder's 300 was going to be the template for Bioshock.
This is Sparta!
300 used cutting-edge green screen technology to create a convincing and stylish version of ancient Sparta. So the plan was to use the same Snyder method to create Bioshock's Rapture. Snyder may have unknowingly helped to birth Bioshock, but unfortunately, he would also do the same to kill it. But we're not quite there yet. Pre-production on Bioshock was happening in 2008, a time when there was no Deadpool, Logan, or $1 billion in profit Joker film. R-rated blockbusters just didn't exist at the time, so naturally, Universal grew wary, not only of Bioshock's mature content, but also of its ballooning cost. With a Titanic-sized budget proposal of somewhere between $160 million and $200 million, Bioshock needed to be a blockbuster in order to justify its massive cost. With pressure from the studio rising, Verbinski and his crew continued pre-production as normal. Concept art was drafted, test footage was shot, and the script was being finalized. Bioshock was ready to enter full production until March 6th, 2009.
The world will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll whisper, "No."
So who watches The Watchmen? Well, apparently not enough people for Bioshock to be made. Zack Snyder yet again unknowingly influenced Bioshock's fate. On a budget of $135 million, and with just $17 million of that budget dedicated to Dr. Manhattan's physics, Yeah. By the end of March, Watchmen managed to bring in a box office haul shy of its budget at just $100 million.
What's up, everybody? Damon here with IGN News. Gore Verbinski's lost Bioshock movie adaptation was literally 8 weeks from shooting before it was abandoned.
And just like that, Universal halted production on Bioshock in April 2009, just 1 month after Watchmen released. An R-rated blockbuster film was a big financial risk, and it was a risk that they weren't going to take.
It's kind of on hold. It's really been hard to get the money to do an R-rated version of that film.
Universal told Verbinski that the film had to have a more marketable PG-13 rating. And on top of that, its budget was being slashed to just $80 million. Unless the film could be made under these terms, production would not continue. With violent splicers, big daddies, and mature subject matter in its source material, a PG-13 Bioshock just wouldn't work, and Verbinski knew that.
The film adaptation of Bioshock, I really feel needs to be true and really scary, genuinely scary.
Unable to come to a compromise with Universal, sadly, after years of work, Gore Verbinski left the project. Universal wasn't content to give up just yet. They hired a new director, Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, who had previously directed 28 Weeks Later. Fresnadillo worked on the project for some time, but he ran into the same issues from Universal that Verbinski had.
You know, it was a project that I worked and I developed for a while, but finally the studio and the video game, they are discussing about the budget and the qualification of the movie. They have some problems with that.
They just wouldn't budge on the rating or the budget. On top of butting heads with Universal, Fresnadillo wasn't making a good impression on Ken Levine either. Unlike Verbinski, who had shared a similar creative vision with Levine, Fresnadillo apparently did not. Levine personally canceled Universal's Bioshock, stating that he had no interest in pursuing a Bioshock film, just for the sake of doing it. He wanted the film to be something special for the fans, and he wanted it to be a good representation of the game. Clearly, he didn't feel like the film was going to meet his expectations. This may mark the end of Universal's Bioshock, but it's not the end of the film. Several years passed. Irrational Games completed Bioshock Infinite. Then, they closed their doors for good, less than a year later, leaving Bioshock seemingly dead in the water with its publisher, 2K Games. Yet, just 2 months after Irrational shut down, several new web domains began to pop up online, all of which were related to a Bioshock movie. After Universal had failed to deliver, 2K sold off the film rights to the next highest bidder, and in this case, that bidder was Sony Pictures. Not much is known about this version of Bioshock, or if it even began production at all, but what is known comes from leaked Sony emails. Remember the hack that happened in 2014 that was supposedly an act of defiance from North Korea over the movie The Interview? This is from that same leak. In this conversation between Sony production executive Michael DeLuca and Sony Pictures chairperson Amy Pascal, several potential details of Sony's adaptation of Bioshock are revealed. Unlike Universal's film, Sony's film was going to take place in a contemporary setting, with the protagonist somehow finding himself lost in Rapture. Rapture is still stuck in the same era it had been since the 1960s, with DeLuca comparing the scenario directly to the plane crash in the TV series Lost. Sony's version of the film would have a reasonable budget, as these two Sony execs seemed less than thrilled with what Verbinski had proposed for his film, and it was going to be tonally similar to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight. Most notably, Sony was going to directly involve Ken Levine in this project in some capacity. Of course, as you well know, this version of Bioshock never made it into production, but there's probably a good reason for that.
I think the guys at Sony are just gonna sitting back now waiting, how does Warcraft do?
Well, there goes that idea. Through all of the production hell that Bioshock went through, it's truly a shame that it never made its way to the big screen. It had all of the cards stacked in its favor to be the movie that would break the mold. The one that proved that not all video game movies are bad. Alright, well, Detective Pikachu was pretty good. With the last entry in the Bioshock series releasing in 2013, I'd say that chances of this film making a comeback are slim to none. Hang on a second. Just as I was finishing this script, 2K Games announced out of nowhere that their new studio, Cloud Chamber, has been working on Bioshock 4 since 2015, and it's expected to come out on the next generation of consoles. In this new era of R-rated blockbusters, could we finally see the Bioshock movie tie into the release of the next game? 2K is clearly not opposed to selling off its film rights, and Gore Verbinski still shows interest in the project to this day, having brought it up in numerous interviews and speaking on it in a Reddit AMA. Only time will tell. Thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and see you next time.
There's something in the narrative of Bioshock that is Oedipal. There's something that is it's just a good story at its core. So I think it would make a great movie.